property nodes allow access to object properties from the block diagram. This tool is particularly useful in situations where you want to change the property of the object depending on the input data. For example, if we measure the ambient temperature using a temperature sensor and display it on the chart, and we would like the line color in the graph to change from green to red when we exceed the maximum allowed temperature. In such situation, we need to use property nodes. Another example is to secure some data with a password. If the user enters the correct password should be hidden when typed, we will discover the hidden data fields. All control and indicator parameters that can be changed using the property pane or the context menu can also be modified programmatically using property nodes. To create a property node, right-click on the control or indicator terminal and select Create Property Node from the menu. Then select the correct property from the list. Each control has properties assigned in a hierarchical way from general properties common to many different elements to detailed properties. After selecting the property of interest, a terminal property node will be created, which by default will be in read mode. To store the value we want, right-click on Terminal Property Node, then select Change to Write. Some applications require a change to more than one property of the object. In this case, you do not need to create two separate property nodes, but you can extend the current terminal to more items. By default, the next item from the property node list will appear. In order to choose the property we are interested in, hover over the unwanted property node with hand cursor, and after right-clicking, you can select the right property. Not all property nodes allow to store and to read of a given value. Some properties are read-only. In example, labels properties, there are some only for writing. In example, value signaling property. Some properties of objects are stored in the cluster. In example, the position of the control. To read the location of the control, you need to use the unbundle function. However, to store the data to the control, you must first create a cluster from them and then pass it to the property node. To demonstrate how property nodes works, let's create a program that displays a sine and a cosine waveforms on one chart. To do this, create a while loop and a stop button. Generate waveforms of the sine function and cosine in the for loop. Let's create an XY graph and display the waveforms of the sine function and the cosine on it. Now let's create two color boxes which will be used to change the color of the lines in the chart. Now let's create a property node that will allow us to change the color of the line on the chart. To do this, right-click on XY graph and select Create, Property Node, Plot, Plot Color. Let's change the property node to right and pass the first color box. Let's run the program. We see that the line representing the sine function changes color. How to change the color of the second waveform? Adding another property node with a color will not change the color of the cosine function. For selecting plot, we need to use property node called ActivePlot. Modify the program so that the two waveforms change color. Let's run the program. We see now that the two waveforms will change color. In addition to changing colors, XY graph has a number of properties that we can modify, for example, the visibility of the chart or the legend. Let's add two buttons that will turn on and off the visibility of the chart and the legend. Let's add the appropriate property nodes. Additionally, let's change the names of the waveforms. To do this, add two string controls. Now add the appropriate property nodes. Let's run the program. We see that we can modify a number of chart properties using property nodes. In this case, the color, visibility of the chart, and legend or the names of the waveforms. However, there are many more properties to modify. The situation becomes more complicated when we want to modify the properties of objects grouped in a cluster. Let's create a program in which we put several controls of different types in the cluster. Let's add the while loops and the stop button. Let's modify the visibility of the numeric control with property node. To do this, create a property node called controls. Let's take out the numeric control using the indexArray function. Let's call the function name to more specific class. And as target class, let's choose numeric. Add property node and select from the list visible property. Let's create a Boolean control that turns on and off the visibility of the numeric control. Let's run the program. We see that we can hide and show the numeric control in the cluster using the button. In conclusion, property nodes is a useful tool that allows you to modify most of the properties of the object from the block diagram level. They enable the creation of a personalized user interface depending on the situation, in example the value of a given variable or options selected by the user.